And every day, I practice martial arts.
Of course, this is pure speculation. But imagine if you had Bruce Lee from 1973, a few months before he passed away, and you could ask him this question. His answer might actually be a lot more ambiguous than people would expect, because people like these black and white answers. No, it was Jun Rhee. No, it was Chuck Norris. No, it was Joe Louis, right? And he might say, well, you know, I had experimented with high kicking when I was in Hong Kong from things that I learned from Siu Hong Sang. And, you know, then I had seen some karate guys in the States, so I started practicing this. And then Jun Rhee gave me a tip on the hip extension. And I saw the way Chuck Norris threw the spinning back kick was a little bit different than the way I thought. So then I took this one thing. And then what you would realize is that it's not a black and white answer. It's that he already had some high kicking, and then he kind of took a little idea from here that made it a little bit better. He improved something there, as pretty much any serious martial artist does.
Evolved.
And I think sometimes you have a lot of these statements, these very black and white statements about Bruce Lee's kicks coming from one particular place, coming from people who are not really highly developed or evolved martial artists themselves. Because if you already have a base of martial arts training, as we can agree that Bruce Lee already had when he came to the States, then a lot of improvements and changes are these kind of subtle evolutions over time, as opposed to these like sudden, from one day to the next, suddenly Bruce Lee was whipping these spinning kicks that he was not even doing a day before.
Okay.
It's usually some kind of like slow process, a gradual change, and taking a little bit from this guy. You know, there are other people who influence Bruce Lee's kicking very clearly that we actually have like video evidence of. And that's Luis Delgado, the former karate champion from those guys, a guy who actually had beat Chuck Norris in competition. There's video footage of Luis Delgado in Bruce Lee's backyard training with Dan Inosanto, doing a kick sequence, like doing like a running side kick, jump spin, kick, whatever. And Bruce Lee liked it in that kicking sequence. Bruce Lee does it in Enter the Dragon. Okay, and you can see that a few years earlier, maybe 5 years earlier, Luis Delgado is doing that same kick sequence in Bruce's backyard. Was Bruce seeing those kicks for the first time in his backyard? Certainly
Maybe
not.
that sequence.
The way they were strung together, and he was like,
Right.
oh, cool. Because now he's looking at someone who comes from a style that does a lot of kicking, and he's looking at how an expert in that style would string the very same kicks Bruce Lee potentially knows already, and he's just looking at how the guy is doing it. Because everyone, like a lot of people who have these arguments assume like it's a zero-sum thing. Bruce Lee either knew no kicking and then suddenly learned this kicking from these aforementioned masters, or the whole thing is false. It's like, why is it only one or the other? It's because of these narratives. The people who are kind of partial to Jun Rhee they're going to overemphasize Jun Rhee's influence, to Chuck Norris, whatever. And those are narratives, but narratives are not even necessarily an interpretation of the facts. They're just a story, okay? And then you can use pictures and stuff easily to confirm this, right? And I don't think that it's actually a black and white answer at all right? The idea that any one of those gentlemen were the first to introduce any type of kicking to Bruce Lee doesn't seem to be accurate. The fact that any of those gentlemen could have shown Bruce Lee a little tip or hack or a little inflection of the foot pivot or a way to do it slightly differently that he took, whether they taught it to him specifically or he just watched them and saw it, because Bruce liked to observe, and I think he learned a lot by observation. I think that's probably more the case. It's not to deny the influence of any of those particular gentlemen, if it in fact exists. And I believe certainly in the case of Jun Rhee, most likely does. Chuck Norris, perhaps less so. Joe Louis, I don't really think. I've looked at the way Joe Louis kicked. Look at Joe Louis's kicks and look at Bruce Lee's kicks and tell me Joe Louis showed Bruce Lee anything about kicking. It's not to say that it's not to say that it didn't happen, but it would be a hard sell, I think. And I think even if you had a very late stage Bruce Lee in front of you, I think he would be able to point to certain little jumps he made because of things that he saw from different people. But I doubt very highly Bruce Lee would say, Jun Rhee taught me a sidekick, as if he didn't know, as if he wasn't throwing sidekicks starting in Wing Chun already, albeit maybe low line sidekicks or whatever. Right. We have this in Wing Chun, right? So I think that even if you could talk to him, I think you would not get the black and white answer that everyone wants. All right. Because people like things in nice, tidy sound bites, and life doesn't work in tidy sound bites. second of all, I think that, you have to be always aware when it comes to dealing with historical questions, because this is a question of history. Okay. And look, this is even recent contemporary history of which some people like Chuck Norris or people who knew Bruce Lee, they're still around, and you cannot get a definitive answer on this. Right. And even if Chuck Norris were to say, I was the one who taught Bruce Lee kicking, that doesn't necessarily mean Chuck Norris is lying. It's just that all these years later, if he did a couple of things that Bruce Lee liked, he might not know how much experience Bruce had with kicking before and might take credit for it, not really understanding that Bruce was maybe getting some hacks or some tips from him, right? So the problem is you even have to look at the narrators and realize that even if they're saying something that might be untrue factually, it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that they're lying intentionally.